Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know Dune Prophecy, Season 1, Episode 4, Born Twice. My name is Grace Leeder, but of course, I'm not alone. I'm not sure how many times they were born, but we'll figure it out. Surprise co-host, Taran Armstrong, taking a couple weeks off from Dune Prophecy, will likely be back by the end of the series. So instead, I brought someone to round out the sisterhood. It's Ariel. Ariel, how you doing?
What's up? I was trying to use the
The
voice.
voice, yeah.
I'm so excited to be here. This is exciting. I wasn't sure what the future foretold as far as this show and my enjoyment of it, but I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised. So here we are.
Okay, I'm excited to chat about it. I think Taryn and I were a little mixed, to say the least, last week with episode 3. I still have my complaints. I thought episode 4 was good. We're moving forward. We're moving towards many things, lots of reveals this episode. I think there's some things that are working better than others, but I'm excited to break it down with you. Ariel, you have been on RHAP before, but you're here on the Dune Prophecy recaps. And one of my favorite memories ever was doing post-show recaps theater with you. It was very early on into the run of that podcast, and we talked about Dune. And I think you watched me like fall in love with Dune so hard. And I think you were like, you got to be careful. You got to be, they're not that good. It could burn you. It's sand.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like sand. But I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, but I love it. I love it. And I loved, but I think you loved it as well.
Yeah.
But I loved talking about the Dune movies with you. And now we get to talk about Dune, the TV show.
Dune prophecy. Yeah, they're using the colon, and it's a good use of it. And I love those movies so much, like you said. So that's why I was like excited about getting to watch it, but also I had kind of stayed away like all these weeks. I just
Yeah.
binged all four, and from my like outside perspective, what I had seen about the show was net like a net review consolidated into one word was like it seemed like it was just boring, like not necessarily bad or good, just like too dense in some way and kind of boring. So I was pleasantly surprised that I had like any emotional connection to it at all. Some wonderful actors that I love, and I think that's part of it for me. It's easy for me to enjoy because if I enjoy you as an actor, then you're just going to get a lot of points from me. And it seems like they very strategically place some of these actors in very specific portions of the board in order to prop up the show overall, really.
Yeah, I think that just from last week, I think my critique is like, I think that the order of events on this show is just like what's not working for me. But I think we were talking a little bit before we started, and I like to use the professional term. It was in our pre-production meeting, not you and I slightly chatting before we podcasted. Which I think that you might disagree. Like you think that like actually, maybe not that like there's nothing to be fixed here. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that like you understand why they put things in the order that they did. My big critique is like I feel like it was so jarring to go just before the halfway mark to flashback all the way into kind of like the middle of the flat of like the exposition
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I thought was jarring. And my defense of the show, I think, it's not going to feel like a defense of the show, Ariel, is that I feel like Warner Brothers and people who want to very carefully handle this delicate little egg called Dune are like causing the showrunners here to like have to walk with extreme trepidation in a way that sometimes feels a little like, okay, we're trying to make a show, but we can't really do that much. But I don't know. I feel like this episode kicks things up a notch, but
Yeah, I definitely liked this one the most. There was a lot to keep track of, and I think that's for the most part to the show's credit. I think there were a couple times where I was like, okay, well, what's this person? What's their motivation? I'm trying to keep track of the plans. But to the point of the pacing and the flashback, like kind of lame, but ultimately by season's end, I think I'll have a better understanding of how I feel as far as the flashbacks placement. I think if it's the only one, like if we don't get any more flashbacks, then I can in a way understand why it wasn't placed at the beginning, only because honestly, and you all got into this when you talked about the first episode, like it was the exposition dump at the beginning was so clunky, and like so it almost lost me. I'm just like, oh my god, can we get to something that actually I don't know, I will have some sort of emotional response to, and that's just like literally listing a bunch of details of what happened. I mean, it did look great. I mean, I'm a sucker for like futuristic robots. So as soon as I see like a robot war, I'm like, ooh, that's
Oh,
something that
you're not going to be
heard
allowed in
about.
Dune. You're not going to be allowed.
I know. Don't tell them that I like thinking machines. But for me, if they had placed that flashback that we got in episode 3 right after that huge exposition dump, like I don't know. I don't know if I would have continued on with the show, honestly.
I think my point is, I think you do put Olivia Williams and Emily Watson. You just put them in for a bit, and then most of the episode is the flashback to like why they're here. And
right.
a big
kind
thing
of what they did in episode 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a big thing that Taran talked about last week was that part of what he's really struggling with is that it does feel pretty hard to understand why Valia is doing things that she is doing. I do think that there's a moment the end of this episode, that maybe isn't like a complete, like, I think Taran will be on board with it, but at the very least, I thought it was very interesting and very compelling. And it's basically both character work and both, super sci-fi Dune stuff. So we'll talk about it. Where do you wanna start, Ariel? I like to ask what the headline is. There is a lot happening in this episode, and I think I actually did ask you, but then I think I'm just gonna say, is it maybe, Tula overseeing all of these women who are having visions of sandworms? Is that because that's where the episode starts, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's definitely, I would say it's like a co-headline. I love the two sisters, right? So like it's we're keeping these two storylines parallel to each other while Valia is off doing her plan. For me, the other side of that coin is Valia's like grand plans and how the other characters react to her plan, and now she has to pivot yet again, right? Like we talked about probably when we were covering the movies, like there's the line plans within plans, and that's very much like Valia's MO. She always has, there's the backup plan, there's the thing that she's trying to investigate Desmond. So I think for sure it's like what's happening on Tula, on Wallach 9 with Tula, and then Valia's return to home now as an adult, not via flashback.
Yeah, so I want to start with the Tula stuff, because what I thought this show was going to be doing was I thought it was going to be sister civil war in the sisterhood. That's what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And it might still be that, but actually there's a way in which now I think, and I do kind of feel like maybe when I was like looking through my notes, I maybe was missing this point earlier in terms of Valia, in that she seemingly is a little more receptive to things happening in the Bene Gesserit than I thought she was doing, and certainly that I would have led to believe in terms of this type of side or piece of if there is a civil war happening within the Bene Gesserit, who she might have, which side might end up winning out, which side Valia is on. But Tula does seem to, so all of these acolytes, the sisters, except for one, have a collective nightmare, which Ariel is terrifying.
That's nightmarish in and of itself.
I'd say like it might be nightmare fuel,
Ariel.
Yeah. Having nightmares about all of us having nightmares at the same time is both terrifying, but it's also very cool. I thought this was like very interesting. I don't know that I've seen this. I'm sure someone will be like, actually, in this movie from 1994.
The only thing it reminded me of, it's not at all the same genre, was the Nicolas Cage movie.
Yeah, the Nicolas Cage movie.
But it wasn't the same dream. It was everyone. Right. He was appearing in everyone's dreams.
Yes.
But this is great. Like the same nightmare, even if it's like slightly attuned to each individual sister's like fears and anxieties, but then ultimately it ends on the same few images, is super compelling and super weird, and obviously something that they haven't seen before.
And there's one acolyte, Emmeline, I think is her name, who almost kills herself, but they are able to stop her from doing that. And then Sister Jen, who does not get the dream. So my question is, it seems to severely affect one person in particular, and it does seem to not affect one person in particular. And what do you make of that? Before you do, though, I also want to point out the lady advisor, the older lady who Tula is like, who she's like,
yeah, she's basically like Valia's spy in a way.
Yeah. what the hell? This lady who is part of the Bene Gesserit, whose whole thing is like, we got to have all the information. We got to know all the memories of everyone before and everyone who comes after. We're going to plan which babies are with which babies. Suddenly there's everyone's having the nightmare and she's like, better not look into it. Better skip it.
Better not to. Yeah, we'll skip that.
So I'm very suspicious of this sister.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I don't think we need to look into that.
No, I mean, that's a good point. And she's probably, I guess my only thought is like maybe she reached out to Valia. I'd be like, this happened. What should I do about that? Because she doesn't seem to act too much on her her own. Do nothing. But it is something but she also doesn't agree with the way, I mean, I guess this is to your point. She doesn't agree with the way Tula's like going about finding out what's happening and like, don't you dare do this to them. And this is dangerous. It's like, well, do you want to know or don't you want to know? Come on.
Yeah, so then she's like, well, I think I'm just going to do the science experiment. I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with the charcoal and the spice.
A great art project.
I went to a class like this once, where we all drink.
Just draw,
whatever. Yeah, close your eyes. They all draw similar things, but then ultimately all draw sandworms, and then they draw two eyes, basically.
Yeah, it looks like two eyes, but we know from where we see the vision, like, is it two eyes? Is it two lights? For sure, on the charcoal, it just looks like two eyes because it doesn't have the context or the coloring, or we don't hear that weird like robotic voice that we hear every time we get the vision of those blue eyes. But you don't want to see just eyes. I mean, maybe I just I don't want to speak out of turn, but I don't think anybody does in their dreams.
So I'll ask you just because I feel like it's a thing I've tried to tiptoe around with Taran a little bit, where Taran has not read or know anything about what comes after the two Dune movies. That's his level. And I don't mean to say this of like, you must out yourself about how much Dune you watched, but I am asking you to out yourself how much Dune you've watched and read.
Lisa Nagaib. I have read a little bit of information, so like let's say like a Wikipedia summary of some of what happens, but have not read any of the books, or certainly like read ahead in that like very traditional way.
That's okay. And I'm not going to spoil it for you because it would be spoiling it for the audience as well, even if you've seen it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's no way to get around, like, we're going to do a Dune show. We have to have like sand and sandworms in some way. Yeah. This is like the lowest CGI way to depict a giant sandworm, I think. But that's okay. It's great. But yeah, we're invoking sandworms and blue eyes, their eyes.
And we know what the blue eyes mean, and we've gotten the little drops of the blue liquid, and it's all very of a piece for me. Like, when it comes to something that I love, which in this case I'm talking about the Dune movie universe specifically, I'm a sucker for like, I'm a simple person. Anytime they say the word Imperium, I got like a chill in my body, just like hearing all the characters from the movie say the word, and like thinking about the blue liquid and the sandworms, and just like that stuff is always going to hit for me. And that's like, I think entirely the point, right? Like, they're like the show is weaponizing my emotions and my feelings about the movie and making like what is for the most part like an inferior product, but also I'm like enjoying it on a level that I wasn't expecting. And I kept making this comp to you and to other people of like, I wish that Rings of Power felt, to me at least, this is just my opinion, felt to me as successful a show living in that universe as this show, which is,
that's really interesting,
to be clear, is not perfect, but I think it just has like a coherence scene to scene that Rings of Power just does not sometimes. And it's like, I was reading about something that happened in Rings of Power. I'm like, I don't even remember that. Like, it just seems like it's so amorphous. And a little bit to your point of like having to play inside certain sandboxes and like the IP rules of it all, that show was like a little bit less successful for me. I mean, having said that, this has only been 4 episodes, so we'll see at the end of the season how I feel. But like, I kept being like, yeah, I wish Rings of Power had been this good.
Interesting. I think Taran I think really liked Rings of Power. I really liked Rings of Power.
I like the emotional parts of it. And similarly, like whenever they invoke something that I love from the movies, I'm there. It's just some of the dialogue. I'm like, oof.
I kind of like that it's like corny, cheesy, Tolkien dialogue, but that's okay. I think that the one thing I would say the thing that I find is that the Rings of Power had some of the coolest things I've ever seen on television. Some of the coolest scenes, moments. But getting from one moment to the other moment is really where they struggled. As opposed to this, I would say that, in my opinion, the scenes are not. There's been not as many incredibly memorable scenes, but I think them getting from the scenes that they are getting to is maybe a little stronger writing wise than maybe sometimes Rings of Power is. So that's my I like them both for different reasons.
Why not both? Yeah,
Why not?
I think
we can watch them both. Yeah.
I agree with you that the big scenes, like the big moments and the big set pieces on Rings of Power feel bigger, and it definitely looks more expensive than this show does at times. Where I'm like, that's a little diet. And I'm not just talking about diet Jason Momoa, Desmond, who we'll get to, but some of the, like you said, some of the effects of the ships or the sandworms. I'm like, yeah, it's a little diet.
Yeah. Okay, so then we finished this like the everyone draws their bad art, and then Tula's like, oh, I think that maybe this was all connected. Everything was before. Don't tell anybody. Right idea, lady. Leave it alone. Except not really. I'm gonna go downstairs and see if maybe Lila is awake. She has a vision of Emmeline discovering the computers, but then she wakes up and Lila is out of the I mean, I was going to say bat the tank. It's not a bat the tank, but
if only. Maybe she would have healed. Maybe she would have healed faster if she had been a back to tank.
And she comes forward has blue eyes. Lila's alive. Yeah.
Blue eyes, full hearts, can't lose. That's the line. This is scary, right? Like, this is something or at least to me, in the sense of Tula is obviously very relieved. This is like her. We already know this is, even though you're not supposed to have these kinds of emotional connections, they take these small girls away from their families at times, and sometimes don't even tell them where they came from. But she has developed like a very close mother-daughter relationship with Lila.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is again where I feel like I have some sense of what is happening here. Like, I kind of think I know, what happened with Lila. The show has not said it, so I'll leave it. But what I did find interesting is that essentially this episode, both sisters end up with an individual who can do something that, from what we know in the future of the Bene Gesserit, is not technically allowed. One is that Lila has been woken up after being in like a machine powered by AI, like a thinking machine. And then we'll get to what happens with Valia later. And that to me is really interesting because it's not, I assumed that one of them would be doing this stuff and the other one wasn't. But it turns out, no, they're both super okay with whatever we got to do to assert power and control.
When it benefits them.
Yeah, and I mean, Tula does think that Lila is the prophet. She thinks that now that she's been born twice, she is the person in the prophet, in the prophecy.
And I think that's so fascinating because I think, and we've talked about this before in like various other like movies or shows, the idea of like prophecy and free will, and like how do you, when you believe in a prophecy, how do you act to make it come true? Sometimes, more importantly, like force it maybe when it isn't, or like when you cause something that wasn't supposed to happen in pursuit of this prophecy. And when she was like talking, when Tula was talking to her still in the fake back to tank, she's like, you have to wake up, you have to be the twice born one. Like, really? Does she have to be? It sounds like you want her to be for like the just the ease of understanding the prophecy, as opposed to like, is there supposed to be someone else who is this? I mean, you could argue they're talking about like one of the characters in the movie that we see. So like maybe this prophecy hasn't come true for a really long time. Like, it's that part of it is
just
really
a quick 10,000 years, Ariel.
How's that listen, you can't rush prophecies. Like, who are you? Prophecy police? Step
1, make the Bene Gesserit. Step 2, find the person. Step 3, question mark. Step 3, prophecy.
To the Bene Gesserit point, I'm like, are they going to just meet a character at some point who's called Bene Gesserit? And I'm like, that's a great name, because we haven't heard
Bene and the Gesserits.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so yeah, I do think this leaves Tula in a pretty interesting place where she thinks that she has created, the person who's in the prophecy. So that's fun. I think I like that. With 2 episodes to go. Okay, Valia goes back to her home planet with the Adoja. She's gonna bring her back and or bring her with her. And we've very coolly, it's like, will you use the power that we're not going to talk about? And she's like, no, I'll never do it again. It's like, surprise. I don't know. Foreshadowing.
We're not going to tell you what it is until the very end of the episode.
I do think, Ariel, in an episode that I did like, this is probably my least favorite part, when Valia brings these other houses to come and convince the Harkonnen guy to like take a place on the Landsrad and to accuse the Emperor. And it's honestly, it's mostly, I really like Mark Strong as the uncle. I'm not loving Baron Harrow Harkonnen, played by Edward Davis. Apologies to the actor himself, but I find him to be a little bit, I feel like he's kind of in maybe the wrong TV show.
Yeah,
that's okay.
It's yes. Shout out to Mark Addy, who was on
Game
of Thrones, as you were. Yeah, Mark Strong. But like, you're of course you're thinking about Mark Strong because
he's
also such a great actor. How could we not be thinking about him?
That's right.
But yeah, Mark Addy. I mean, you all already talked about this. Like, it's just like, what, Game of Thrones? Like, I'm like, okay. Especially in the flashback when they're like in what is basically Winterfell because of all the snow. I'm like, the king is back. I did like the scene that you're talking about of Valia bringing the 2 people, but only because I found it so funny. Her nephew is just hilarious when he like calls her over. He's like, "Oh, what is?"
See, I don't
think that the show.
Okay that
I
you
will say,
it.
I don't think. Right? No, thank you. But I don't necessarily think the show is like it's playing for me the way the show intends. But I was still enjoying it, if that makes sense, right? And like, I think she seems to be so tickled with like somebody who is not as, I don't know, bloodthirsty, power hungry as hers, like trying to act within her plan. I really do enjoy Emily Watson. My overall Emily Watson note only is like, as the head of the Bene Gesserit organization, Sisterhood, she really needs like a more impressive headpiece than the one that she's been wearing for all these episodes. Like, I get that you cast Emily Watson because you want to keep showing her face. Keep the veil the same, but I need more structure on the head. She looks like a lower sister than the sisters with the square head.
This is the beginning. This is the beginning of the Bene Gesserit.
You still need fashion. Because it's the beginning. I would argue you need the high fashion more. I can't help but think of Rebecca Ferguson's costumes in Dune 1 and 2, but
the original Mother Superior, who's in the original Dune movie. She looks quite incredible, and you can never see her face.
That's all I'm saying. Like, just make it a little more complicated. But no, this scene wasn't my favorite. I mean, I will say it was helpful in keeping track of this plan, which gets like more and more convoluted. But yeah, it's a scene that is like not impressively written.
And the thing is I don't want to critique the show for trying to put some humor. Dune is a very serious property. I feel like the thing that worked for me, I think it's honestly one of the funniest things I've seen in all year, is the Javier Bardem performance as Stilgar this year, of just friggin' loving Paul. Like, Dune 2 is actually very funny in terms of whenever like Paul's like, I'm not the, I'm not it. And then they're like,
I'm not,
if he's it, he would say he's not it, so he must be it. Like, it's so good. It's so funny.
I remember,
but I do think it's a fairly like serious show in tone. And so it's pretty hard to fit like the comedy in here. For me, the like sniveling Harkonian was not working for me, but I don't blame them for trying to fit some humor in here, because I think it's like a critique we had about like season 1 of House of the Dragon and some other properties. It's like, there does need to be comic relief even in the like the grimmest of shows. So, don't blame them. But she's going to finally accept the offer of being their truthsayer. This will then allow him to get a position, and he's going to do it. He's going to decide to do it, and so he goes and accuses him. This is where we get more Travis Fimmel, who I think, for my money, I hate saying it, but I think in the show that's all about the women, he's my favorite part. I feel so bad saying it, but I think he's the best part of the show, Ariel.
I think he's good. I think he's doing something very interesting with, especially in the first few episodes, he was doing something very interesting with like his facial tick. And that sounds so silly, but like, it's all intentional, face acting. And that is like endlessly entertaining to me, and like his eyes are a certain color. I shared with you a theory about him that I think is absolutely ludicrous and makes no sense, but like that's just what I'm choosing to believe, as far as like what kind of being he is. But he is, I mean, he's the part of the show that they are keeping most concealed, and I think that he is a good enough actor that he's keeping me compelled, but I am immensely more drawn to Emily Watson, Olivia Williams as Tula, Mark Strong, of course. I will just quickly shout out also Jessica Barden, who played young Valia, who was in End of the
Yeah,
Effing World on Netflix.
she's very good.
I thought her line from last episode, "Complacency is a disease," was delivered like exceptionally well. So shout out to her. But yeah, I call him Diet Jason Momoa for a reason. I think I had a little bit of like bumping up against, you can't just like recast Jason Momoa in his best role that he's ever had and just expect me to feel the same, but I'm interested.
Okay. Well, that's good. Again, we can disagree on what we like and we don't like in the show.
Can we?
There is this attempted assassination attempt that also in the scene involves. So this is the rebel group that actually is being put together by Valia to basically have a moment where they go to do this assassination attempt. The Bene Gesserit will stop it from happening, and therefore the Bene Gesserit will re-win the trust of Haviko Carino, Mark Strong's character. We were talking a little bit before. I do think like there's a little bit of like, why do these guys want to? Why do the rebels want to do it? Other than like the generic line of like, but we must let the spice flow. I will acknowledge the person who pointed out that this is the guy. Did you watch Fargo earlier this year, Ariel? And
Not the
again,
latest one, no.
that's okay. This guy is the best part of the new season of Fargo.
Ooh.
This guy, he is an incredible, and I just want to. I think his name is Ole Munch, literally OleMunch, Ole Munch, and he's very good at that. He's one of the rebels here. They are just trying to like cause chaos and rebel, and they want the spice to flow, and they want to make a effort, so they're willing to do it. Of course, we know that it's Vatican, but none of it really goes to plan when like the daughter comes in and is like, "Hey, you killed that kid," and he's like, "Yeah."
Damn it,
Yeah,
Inez. You know,
yeah,
like, why, princess, why are you messing up? Like, he gets to the point where he's like, one of the great houses assassinated young Pruitt, and then Inez is like, get out of the way, it's me who's gonna say it. And she's like, it was you, it was my dad. And you're just like, oh no, what's gonna happen now? And Valia herself is also like, uh-oh, what's happening to my plan as I constructed it so carefully.
yeah. The love story thing in here, not the working the best for me.
It's a
But
no for me. This is probably the Atreides character, the
Kieran, yeah.
the mole in the house, Kieran. It's a no. It's that feels like more than anything else like a little bit to a point you all had made of like the Atreides name being just tacked on to a character for purposes of making us go, oh my god, is that someone related to Paul, our main character in the movies? This feels like that to me.
There is an interesting thing in here, and this is something that I have no information on, so it's just a theory. But Kieran mentions that his son was the survivor of an atrocity. Is Kieran the son of the boy who survived last
Oh, that
episode?
makes sense. Yeah, because it's that very classic run, leaving the one person alive who's gonna get revenge on you later on child gimmick that they always do. That could be. I think that's a great call. That already makes him way more interesting because right now it's kind of a no for me.
Yeah, I think the other stuff too with having the Atreides and having them both like Atreides and Harkonnens, like I just feel like again the 10,000 year things is so tough for me to get, and I know we keep saying it, so apologies. So tough to get over it because it's like, but we do know that their houses will be successful. At least they've now put this in a situation where like they're not so successful that like it might not be this moment that like propels them up. There is another Atreides that is mentioned a very like around this time Atreides that's mentioned. I think he's the first Atreides mentioned by Frank Herbert. That is not any of the characters we've seen so far, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I just don't really know. Other than that, their names are Atreides. I'm like, okay, fine.
Like, oh, that's familiar.
But yeah, they get caught. Also, it does seem like potentially it is the Empress Natalia,
Yes.
who is the one who like leaks that it was Desmond who did it, and
Mhm.
also gets him to kill all of the rebels in the room. And
Mhm.
I love how every time Desmond kills someone on behalf of Mark Strong, Emperor Carino, he just comes back and goes, "Hey, yeah, gosh, you can't do that again. Hey,
We've talked about this.
hey, son, you know that I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. You can't do that again. Your back's bleeding. You
Oh
can't
my
do that
god,
again.
you hurt yourself doing that.
Come on." And he's like, "Dad, I did it for you."
Yeah, this I will say, like, the Empress Natalia character has become like really interesting to me in the last couple episodes, and like I love the way that she at first was like so not trusting and very suspicious of Desmond and his whole plot of
Yeah,
being like the reason why he was even there. And now she's like, "Oh, my husband is kind of a doofus, so I'm gonna be the Cersei in this situation and like
yeah,
kind of pull the strings." And she's the one, like you said, that leaked the information, the rumors of like Pruitt being murdered. And now she sends Desmond to round up all the people, like you said, the rebels, so that we can have like a big show of killing them. And because at that point, she puts her husband in the position in this very public way that he has to say, like, what could he possibly do in that moment except kill them?
yeah. I yeah, I mean, I actually really like all this. I think the thing is, I love the Empress stuff too. I kind of wish maybe like I think what's happening right now is the show is spread so thin
Mm-hmm.
in terms of so many characters and potential motivations that I really feel like we're like struggling to get deep on almost everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um and the thing that like works about that to a sense is that like they can't really go deep on Desmond. So if he was like the only one who wasn't
Right,
having
right.
anything happening, like maybe it's a little more like but we already know there's so much happening there that I think it would be fine. But we really don't get much about like why the Empress feels like this is the way to like other than sort of just classic tropey stuff of like her husband is won't do it, this is very like Lady Macbeth, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part I do think the stuff on this it's kind of like the stuff on the surface is really good. I sometimes wish we were getting a little bit deeper down is what I think.
No, I completely agree. And I think there's a way, this is actually one of the ways that Rings of Power is like superior for sure, is like the emotional like the emotional system belief that the characters live under is like way more clear. And like here you get, like you all talked about last week with the flashback of like Tula especially, like, or with the brother, like, okay, I'm gonna go do this thing, and oh no, he died. Like it's just they're like yada yadaing so many things of like why Tula would even care enough to like kill the Atreides. Like that doesn't really feel, we don't really get the motivation behind that. And a lot of Valia, besides Valia being like, I'm the only one who's fighting for House Harkonnen, and that House Harkonnen does rise certainly from the level where it is right now, later on in the history and the respect across the universe that it gets. There, some of that stuff does just feel a little bit yada yada, that I'm like, okay, whatever. You want me to keep, I'm at least like keeping up with most of the plot. It's just some of the stuff could be drawn out. I mean, it's tough in 6 episodes. I'm surprised. Like I think there's a way in which that just feels so edited down. Like maybe it was supposed to be more and they found it to be too much and they cut it down. I don't know, but it's a tall order for sure.
Yeah. But for the most part, I think again, I like the plot mechanics here, and I actually think things are coming together in a way that I think are better than I expected and are surprising to me. Because again, I thought the show was going to be one thing, and I think has been slightly different because we're going to finish the episode with, I think there's one really important thing and there's one minor thing that happens at the end here, which is Valia gets Desmond's blood. She gets a speck of blood and asks for it to be sent to Tula to examine. That to me is just worth noting. I think that's interesting, and I feel
For
like
sure.
leads us into next episode to say we will likely know something more about Desmond, unless the whole episode happens at the end of the episode. It's like Desmond is this, and then it's like into the finale. But we'll see. It feels
He's a
like
human from Earth. Oh no.
it should feel like we should get some more Desmond information
Mm-hmm.
at the very least a little bit next episode. So that happens, and then I mean, I said this one thing. Valia does let her uncle die. Is the best way to put it? Doesn't kill him. She does kill.
Fear. Valia she's the mind killer, not Fear. Yeah, he just, I mean, we get early in the episode he has like his some kind of oxygen machine or something like that, and he's suffocating in this moment, and all she does is step away for him to die out of her direct sphere of breathing of air. And it's like, because it's this actor Mark Addy, you just do feel, at least I certainly was like feeling a lot more than I would have otherwise if it had just been a no-name person.
Yeah.
It's tough for you to be the actor that died in all these properties.
Well, someone's gotta, okay, so then he dies, but then Griffin, who also died, shows up to be like, I'm so sorry. I see what you've gone through now. I understand.
He's like, hey. It's me.
And she's like, oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Theo. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and the way that she kind of like touches Theo as Griffin, it's very much like this. Oh my God, it's so you feel this is obviously her knowing fully well what is actually happening, just like, oh, this is actually kind of nice to see my brother standing before me. But yeah, this is a wild reveal that she's an Animorph, basically, in some way.
The last scene is kind of like the cover of an Animorph. Yeah.
It's very like this, the ending of that felt very much like the Skrulls in MCU, because especially honestly because of how kind of crappy it looked in parts.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough CGI. I don't know. They gotta they have to drill the point home, and also it's it's fine. So I did say this to Taran last week. I said, put on your bingo card, shape changer, Taran, and I was maybe not who I thought was going to end up being a shape changer, but here they are. Theo, a young acolyte within the Bene Gesserit, is a shape changer. What do you make of this, Ariel?
Well, I love that, first of all of these sisters in training seem to have like some random power that nobody else has, and it's just like, that thing that you can do, you should do that thing. And they're like, no, I would never do that again. And it's kind of like in a way it's comparable to Valia's power, right? Like she developed the voice when her brother was drowning or whatever, and like that's just an inherent skill that she has, so like that part is consistent. But this, it's a little worrisome to me, because I don't want to be playing next episode, especially because she's seemingly like often on this mission now, like whoever she's going to go and impersonate seemingly. I don't want to be spending the whole episode like, who is that? Is that, or next 2 episodes theoretically, like, is this her? Is Theo? Is this the real person? Especially if a person's acting weird. Like, I want them to have fun with that, but I also don't want them to go too far with it and make it like just a crutch that's gonna guide how we get to like some twist ending or whatever.
Yeah, that's really fair. I think the worry of like the unsolvable mystery kind of, or like this putting this thing on the board of like, now anybody could be anybody in a way that's maybe not fun. Maybe some people would find it. Maybe it's like, could you tell?
Yeah, where's Waldo?
That's right. Next episode. This is one of the things that I was thinking that they were doing as a this was not a thing I was expecting for sure as a thing that they were going to do in the show. It was a thing that I thought they possibly could do, and it definitely still does fall into the, I think, setting up potential things. This is not one that I thought for sure was going to happen, but it makes sense with the other things that I know that I feel like are still being set up to potentially onboard some people who are going to watch the 3rd movie. If they've watched Dune Prophecy, I think they'll have a little bit of understanding. Again, not that it will be necessary viewing. And then also some of the stuff that I think like Reddit users are having a bit of book readers who are having a lot of fun being like, this is what I think is happening. So I probably won't. I still won't say. But there is
I
a.
love it. You're so dancey, just dancing
Well,
around it.
I really do feel like I don't want to spoil it for folks, and
Of
I
course,
wonder if
yeah,
I'm
that's
like
totally
doing.
fair.
I wonder if I'm doing a disservice by being like, "There's stuff coming," and then not saying anything.
But I think that's, your mileage may vary on whether that's useful or fun, but like that's part of what the show wants you to be doing, right? Because the show ideally is wanting to appeal to both people who only see the movies or haven't seen the movies at all, or the people who are like deep into the lore and they're second guessing every little thing.
Well,
Could it be the appearance of X or Y or whatever?
Well, let me. I think I can say this without realizing. But there is the place that most shape changers come from are from an organization, and I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of this because it's really tough because it starts with a TL, so it's like Tilaxu, I think is the way you say it, and I could be wrong about this. They are a group of people who are very isolationist, hidden. They're very religious and zealot, but they're most famous for gene manipulation. So essentially,
Ooh.
Theodosia, we don't know this for sure, whether she was basically like, and like the way that they are created in from Thalaxus is that they're like created. We don't know if Theodosia is like has had this inherent power her whole life or whether she was created.
Right.
And then the other piece of this is how much does Valia, who within the Bene Gesserit, there's like by the time we get to the movies, there's like a very much like no thinking machines, none of this, none of this. So this does seem to be this is a secret that's been hidden, right? She's like, I haven't used it since. How involved is Valia in terms of did this woman come to her and be like, I need to join the Bene Gesserit because I need to hide my identity, or did she come to her to be like, or did Valia find her and is like, please, like I would, or like, and then did she go to her and sneak her away? Did she go to these people and be like, I need to buy this child, basically? Like,
yeah, like I'll give you a truth sayer and we need like a ward in order. I mean, that definitely feels like a Valia thing of like, we want to have, especially her as the person who feels the pressure, use every tool, right? She's told by her mother superior when she's dying, like use every tool you can of her trying to enlist and get girls who have who are special in some way. Like that feels like a Valia thing.
Yeah, so then I think this is kind of fun to talk about it with like you who are going into these last episodes much blinder than me, I think. But I'm still really blind in terms of what this show is trying to do because there's not history written. Like it's not the same as I can go. And George R. R. Martin has written every single king who is going to rule from the time of but like by the time Targaryens land on Westeros to the time of the show. This does not exist for this, or at least I have not like delved so far in that I can know that information. Right. So all of this to say is I thought the show was going to be about sisterhood civil war and which one of these sisters has the vision of what the Bene Gesserit will be to create the Bene Gesserit that moves them on the path to the version we see in the movie. And I feel like now what I'm seeing is like kind of neither of them are what I thought was they were like holders of the version of what the Bene Gesserit can be. So that means a few things. One is that all of these things that they're doing are things that the Bene Gesserit did at this period of time to create the version of the Bene Gesserit that we know in the future. So even if shape changers were not allowed, was shape changing something that informed how they're able to choose which babies they have? Because a big part of the Dune movie is that Jessica is told, have a girl. You're going to have a girl and it will marry the Harkonnen boy. And that's what happened. And she's like, just kidding. I'm going to have a baby boy.
Yeah. Hubris.
Yeah. This is the opposite of what my mom did. I was like, she had a baby boy and I was trying to be like, Mom, no.
She didn't know about your powers.
That's right. So is it that, or are these actually figures that in the long run, like will these be fallen heroes of the show who try to create a version of the Bene Gesserit that ultimately fails for whatever reason and somebody else comes like pushing forward? These are all the things that like I'm kind of thinking about, but I don't know, is this like what are you looking forward to the last 2 episodes of Dune?
I mean, I think for sure, to an earlier point you made, one of the things that I thought was set up from the beginning was a much bigger possibility and likelihood, which could still come, of a separation or civil war, to put it most extremely, between the two sisters. Because especially when you consider when we saw the flashback of Valia's Reverend Mother, and it's Valia and Dorothea they're kind of being scolded for having developed acolytes themselves, like within the sisterhood. And like ultimately we know Valia took her out. I mean, it wasn't as simple as I need to take out my competition. It was, this woman is not going to allow me to fulfill the prophecy that our Reverend Mother passed on to us, and she told me that I'm the only one who can, so I have to kill her. But like, how far will that extend to what happens if your sister stands in the way of that? And like, I think that's like super, super compelling. I think at this point, again, it could still happen, but like, what choice, like I think Valia's choice of like upholding her aim, right? Like, and this goes back to when she was first taking the oath, right, to join the sisterhood, of like, what's more important to you ultimately, this prophecy and the sisterhood? She makes the distinction in that terrible exposition dump in the very beginning, history versus prophecy. And I try to live my life by prophecy as opposed to history. And like, is history going to play a part in a decision that she makes? Because at the end of the day, she does still want to raise House Harkonnen to the level that she's always thought it should be at. And there's like an element of pride, right? Like, a person who lives her life the way that she does, she has a huge ego. She believes that she's like the one that can lead the whole freaking sisterhood. So like, why not also her family? I think there could be like a duality there that comes into play in some way. It's a little less interesting to me than like the thing with her sister, possibly, but I think that might be a big deal by the end.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is like where we set up this last episode is that we know that Valia is willing to. She has a shape changer as part of the Bene Gesserit. I believe also there's am I right in that there's one of them is a Fremen as well? So she is willing to sort of have these different Bene Gesserit around. Tula has also engaged in something that generally seems to be secretive and hidden in terms of bringing Lila back to life. And they're both about to, well, at least Tula is about to get information as to who or what Desmond Hart is. That then sets us up on a little bit of like, do they want to use that? Like, is that information that they can use for the Bene Gesserit, or is that information they have to like sort of like, use to get rid of the control that Desmond Hart seems to wield within the Emperor's power? Because we know by the time the show rolls around, like the Bene Gesserit are still hanging around, being confidants to the Emperor, and in fact secretly choosing how the line continues.
Yeah, how the line continues. And
yeah,
like you had said before, it comes to a head with like Jessica and Paul in the movies, and that's always going to be interesting to me, at least, of like what is being set up now, or not being allowed, or being pushed, or being prevented, whatever, that's going to affect that. But also it's like, there's a way in which no matter what happens in the show, like there's enough time between now and then that like you can like change history. It's interesting. And I hope that ultimately it doesn't feel too much like either an explanation of what we've seen in the Dune movies, or like worse for me, like a strict explanation or seeding for things that are going to come in the third movie. But I mean, prophecy's always going to be interesting. They picked the right word after the colon, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it was sisterhood at one point, so
that's almost as good.
Yeah. All right. Do we miss anything from episode 4? Ariel, Born Twice is the title.
No, I did watch it twice.
Wow.
Speaking of Born Twice. But yeah, I think that's everything. Like, I think Inez as a character is like almost the princess is almost as interesting as they want her to be, and I kind of wonder if she's gonna have a part to play towards the end that's more important than what she's had so far, because she seems to be like defiant of her dad. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there are kind of, although the Desmond Hart stuff is really intertwined, obviously, with the Emperor stuff, I still do feel like that feels like its own thing, and then it feels like the kids are its own thing, and like Kieran, and that's whole stuff, and then there's like the sisterhood. So I think you have 3 sort of ingredients into
Right.
these last 2 episodes that is more interesting maybe than just the one. My favorite moment is I'm struggling right now to remember the brother's name, Inez's brother. But
Oh yeah, the wannabe Chalamet. Yeah.
the only moment he has this episode is that he goes to stand up to support his sister, and his dad says, "Sit down," and he sits down.
Sits down, and he
It's so
sits
funny.
down.
It's so
Terrible
funny.
look for him. Terrible look for him.
Well, future emperor probably. So
Well, we'll
yeah,
see.
we'll see. All right. Well, then that is episode 4. Ariel, thanks so much for joining me to talk about Dune Prophecy, and it is Twice Born, not Born Twice. So I got that mixed up. I was hoping to see Jason Bourne, but he didn't show up.
Twice Bourne.
Well, you can wish.
Where's Julia Stiles? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I asked that for every single show I watched. We actually have to edit it out how much I asked that question. All right, Ariel, what else you got going on?
This was so much fun. Thanks for having me. I am, covering TV and movies over at Crying Laughing Podcast with Dr. Amanda. We do a What We're Watching segment. We talk about series. We talk about movies. Also, we've been covering 6 Feet Under, and we're in the last 6 episodes now, which is crazy.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff coming that I am not ready for, to be completely honest, but I'm excited. One
of the greatest finales of all time, I've heard, Ariel.
It's not true.
Wow.
I am on X, Twitter at that other Ariel. I am on Letterboxd at AR_F, and that's me.
Okay, well, very fun. Thanks for joining. I recently joined you to talk about movies on.
Yeah, you
Crying
did.
Laughing.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we did a whole movie breakdown from the last like 3 months or so. Yeah, long enough.
roundup.
Yeah, so fun. It was it was like extremely fun.
Probably too fun, to be honest.
It probably was. Yeah, a lot of people actually probably will be a little annoyed at how how much fun we were having at the expense of anybody who was listening. The Tastemakers will drop a new episode this week. We talked about the Golden Globe nominations and all this other stuff we're watching. I'm currently loving Black Doves on Netflix. I think everybody should be checking it out. Fun holiday
I've heard
spy
great
thriller.
things.
It's very fun. It's only 6 episodes.
Ooh, say less.
No, I can't. It's actually if I said less,
it's only 6 episodes.
And then Silo recaps and Star Wars Skeleton Crew with Owen Knight from Survivor 43. So that's very fun. We'll be back this week. And make sure to subscribe to We Know Scripted TV. We'll be back with 2 more recaps of Dune Prophecy, including Taran returning for the finale episode. So until then, bye-bye.